In today's video, we are going to be talking about how to reduce no-shows and cancellations in private practice. A couple of weeks ago, I was launching my course Virtually Done, which is a 4-week course on setting up your private practice management systems. So I did a free webinar of this training and I got some really good feedback for it. So I thought what I would do is I would cut out all the stuff to do with the course and just give you the training. It has loads of tangible things that you can do to reduce no-shows and cancellations in your private practice. And also, if you check out the description, I've added lots of information that is included in the slides that I think you'll find really useful. Right at the end, the video does cut off quite abruptly, and that's because I start talking about the course, but I didn't want to put that information in this video. I just wanted to keep it purely based on the subject, which is how to reduce no-shows and cancellations in private practice. So sorry about the quick cut off at the end. Just quickly, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kim. I help therapists in private practice get online, get confident with admin and reduce tech overwhelm. So let's jump straight into the training. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me. As I said, this is the How to Reduce No-Shows and Cancellations training. Obviously, I am not a therapist. For those of you who don't know me, I am Kim, and I've worked with therapists for the past, since 2016. I can't do quick maths right now, 7 years maybe. And I started out as a virtual assistant working with therapists, and I've now developed into really helping therapists learn how to do their own private practice admin, so that they don't need a virtual assistant, and how to set up their practice as well. So that is who I am. So the first thing to really kind of talk about is why people no-show or cancel in the first place, because if we don't understand the reasons that people don't show up, it's hard to kind of put practices in place so that we can reduce that. So these are some reasons I think of, and feel free to add any that you also, in your experience have realized why people don't turn up. So obviously we've got the first one of people being nervous, and that can be more of the beginning of the therapy journey when they're really anxious to start therapy. They've taken that step to contact you, but now they're not quite sure if it's really the route for them. Second reason is there are no consequences anyway. So if they don't show up, they're not going to get charged and they'll be able to see you the next time they want to. So if there's no consequences, it can be much easier for them to not show up if they're feeling any of the other kind of reasons that we talk about. Obviously, they could just plain forget, or they could be sick, or there could be some miscommunication between you and them with regards to appointments and things like that. So there's some reasons that I, have thought about, and they're what I'm going to talk about in the training, kind of resolve some of these reasons to hopefully negate them as much as possible. Okay, so the first thing that I really encourage everyone to do is have a no-show and cancellation policy. So I've written some questions here, and what I'm going to do is I will take this slide as I'll create it as a document, as a picture, and I'll send that out with the replay and the email templates so that you can have a think about these questions. Because if you don't have a policy, then how do you communicate your boundaries and things like that with the clients? If they don't know what your policy is about cancellations and no-shows, then they're just going to assume you don't have one. And so you cannot say to them, oh, I'm still going to charge you for that session because you didn't turn up, when you haven't actually put that to them in any way. You haven't told them it, you haven't put it in your paperwork, you've never mentioned it. It's really hard to enforce some consequences and boundaries if you don't have this. So I really encourage you to think about a no-show and cancellation policy and put that in your paperwork, put that in your therapy agreement. So I'm sure you've read, as I'm talking, I'm sure you've read all these, but these are some questions to really think about. How long before this session can people cancel where they won't be charged? Now, I work with clients that have a range between 24 hours and 1 week. The sweet spot seems to be 48 hours. The majority of clients I work with and the majority of clients I have worked with say about 2 days, 48 hours is kind of the sweet spot for both the client and for the therapist to kind of I want to say get the most benefit from, but that's not it. If you give somebody a week's notice, that's literally from their last appointment possibly, and how do they know exactly that they're going to be ill, or a meeting comes up or something like that. Whereas if it's one day, it's much harder for you to fill that space. So if they just cancel the day before, people wanting to reschedule and things like that, it's usually much harder to fill that space so that you actually still get revenue. So I think 2 days seems to be ideal, but this is completely up to you. I'm just giving you some experience that I have. You obviously make whatever works for you in your practice. Also, how they can tell you. So do you want to be texted if they need to cancel, or do you just want an email? And again, if they're cancelling late notice, so maybe they are stuck in traffic and they're not going to make it, is it okay for them to text you then? So things like that. And are there any particular circumstances you won't charge for? Now, I don't suggest putting this in your paperwork, but just have that in the back of your mind, that if somebody's relative is sick, like dying, or if I don't know, but there'll be lots of circumstances that maybe you would waiver, because even if you have a policy, it doesn't mean you rigidly have to stick to it. There are always nuances and reasons where you'd be like, okay, that's valid. Or maybe if the first time they cancel a session, you let them go, but then anything after that, you'll charge them for. So just some things to think about that maybe not necessarily needs to go in the paperwork, but just to have in the back of your mind. And what is the charge if they cancel without enough notice? So are you going to charge them the full fee, 50%? Are you going to penalise them in another way? So if they cancel more than 3 sessions, then they lose their slot with you, things like that. I have clients who only let people cancel 2 sessions a month maximum, and then they charge, so they can have a 2-week break, but that's it. Otherwise, they can't hold their space. So have a think about what you would charge, but also how many times they can cancel. I actually talk about that one more down, so I've kind of merged those two together. And also, do you offer to reschedule? So we're going to talk about this. I think it's in the next slide, so I'm going to go into that a little bit more. And how long will you wait for a client to arrive? So most of the clients I work for, again, will hold the space for 15 minutes, but then they've lost the space because if they've only got a 35-minute session, maybe it's not worth them coming. Maybe you do half sessions and that's okay. But how long will you actually wait for a client, and specify that in your paperwork. And then what is your rebooking policy? Again, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But do you have regular slots with clients, or are they ad hoc? So how are you confirming that they're going to come to their next appointment? Again, I will send this out so you can have a think about these questions for your own practice. Okay. Another thing that I really encourage you to do is stick to an actual schedule. So what I mean by that is deciding when you want to work and really sticking to that. So if you just want to work 3 days a week in private practice, you don't want to work evenings, you don't want to work weekends, then don't have that availability. If clients say they can't come to a session, but can you reschedule for later in the evening? If you don't want to work in the evening, then don't have that as a possibility. Most of the successful therapists that I work with work this way. They see clients on a regular weekly or bi-weekly basis, where they see them at the same day, the same time. And that is a really great way to be able to fill your practice and know exactly how much revenue you're going to earn each week and each month, because you're not letting people just book in whenever they want. And it also makes clients more responsible for their own therapy, because they have this schedule, they have a confirmed slot with you. So if they don't want to lose that slot, then they need to make sure they're attending, the majority of their sessions. Because if you just let people book ad hoc, they probably would do that less. I have clients that I work with that have 3 days a week. They only work kind of normal office hours, and they are completely full, and they have a huge waiting list. So don't think that you have to offer weekends and evenings to fill your practice if you don't want to. Obviously, if you do and you love working evenings, and maybe you prefer mornings for yourself and you want to work in the afternoon and evening, like perfect, you'll definitely have clients that want to do that. But I don't want you to think that you can't fill a practice if you only work during the day. Just checking if I have any more notes about this one. Oh yeah, so I have a YouTube video all about time blocking and a perfect week, or this could be called a model week. So it's a way for you to think about when you want to see clients, when you have your own personal things to do, and really plotting that out so that you can, create how you'd love to work in a week. And what some therapists do that I find really helpful is that if they want to see, let's say they want to see 15 clients in a week, they plan when those sessions are going to be. So the clients have to fit in with them rather than the other way around, and you're trying to, slot into a client's schedule. They need to slot into your schedule. And also they might have a couple of buffer slots. So they might say, at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday, I'll have a slot that I'm not going to give away to anybody. But if somebody wants to reschedule, I've always got a couple of buffer slots that I can fill. So they're not clients that you need, as in, I don't need to have 18 clients. I can have 15 clients. I can't remember what I just said. Let's say I said 15 clients was what I wanted. I don't need to have 18 clients, but I can use those slots as buffers for reschedules. And if they're not used, great, I can do something else with my time. I can do my admin, or I can do, you can do something else, go for a walk in that time if they're not filled. So sticking to a schedule is a great way to help reduce no-shows and cancellations, because the client knows exactly when they're going to see you. They know Monday at 10 o'clock is my slot each week, and they'll put it in their diary. You'd hope they put it in their diary, and it would always be the same. They know where they're going to see you. They know how they're going to see you. And it's just much easier for people to not forget, because if you're booking in ad hoc appointments, they're probably the ones that aren't going to show up as much. Okay. Setting expectations early as well. So I know that it can be quite daunting to say on a intro or a screening call with a potential client, if you offer that, about your boundaries. So a screening or intro call is not just for the client to see if they want to work with you. It also is to see if the client is a good fit for you, and being really clear about your availability. So like I just said, you're not slotting in with them. You say, these are my available slots. I only work with people on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and letting them see if they can fit into that. I would also suggest advising people about your cancellation policy on that call, letting them know that, if you don't turn up or if you need to cancel a session, like, that's totally fine, but I need 48 hours notice. So that's really fine to say. And I know a lot of therapists that do that on the call, and it makes them feel really empowered to do that, to have that conversation with people. Also, getting payment up front for the first session. So letting them know that for their first session to be saved, they will need to pay you kind of right away. And however you do that, whether you send them an invoice in their welcome email, which we'll talk about in a minute, or whether you send it via Stripe or a different payment system, Starling, maybe PayPal, however you send your invoices, getting that payment up front, because if there's any session a client's not going to turn up to, it's the first one. And although they might be really feeling like therapy's for them and they've plucked up the courage to contact you, this is going to really separate the people who are really wanting to go to therapy and the ones that aren't. If you're asking for them to give you payment, to hold your space, but also send their paperwork back. I've worked with therapists in the past, and they say, I always know the ones that aren't going to turn up, and they're the ones that don't complete the paperwork and don't pay me. So, get that out of the way straight away. Just let them know what your policy is around them, that first session. And that will really, if they don't pay within the 48 hours before that first session, let them know that it's going to go. And then you've got that slot open for other people if you've got a waiting list or something like that. So set expectations early. Don't be afraid to say that in the call. Obviously you can say that super nicely and just be really clear about why you're doing that. And most clients who are, wanting to go ahead with therapy and are really excited to work with you, is excited the right thing about therapy? Who knows? But those that want to work with you won't care about this. They'll be like, yes, that's fine. Okay, admin is your friend. I promise, admin is your friend. So I talk about client onboarding a lot. I have blogs on it. I did a podcast with Jane Travis, and I've also got a YouTube video all about onboarding. So I could literally do, and I think I did do a whole workshop about why onboarding clients is important. So I don't want to go into that, all the reasons why client onboarding is important. What I want to do is focus on why it's important to help you with no-shows and cancellations. So these are some things that you can do to help reduce cancellations and no-shows. So the first thing is, when you take on a new client, make sure you send them a welcome email. The welcome email is going to be in one of the Gmail templates that I give you. So I will send that to you, and basically you can download that and you can download that and then edit it yourself. So I've given you like a framework, but you can put your own spin on things, put your own personality into it, and add your own obviously practice details. But sending a client a welcome email can really help those who are feeling really nervous and anxious about that first session, letting them know what to expect. So letting them know how they can pay. That can also be a real problem for people, because I know, for example, when I started therapy, the therapist she was an amazing therapist, but she didn't send me any kind of welcome. I couldn't remember what we had decided, whether we were doing Zoom or WhatsApp FaceTime thing. So that was stressing me out, because I was like, oh, I don't know which one. Is she going to call me? Am I supposed to call her if it was WhatsApp? And then also she didn't ask me to pay. So I really wanted to make sure that I paid for the session up front, but she hadn't told me or sent me an invoice. So I was feeling, although I was fine about doing the therapy, I was feeling really anxious about actually, how am I going to get on this call and how am I paying for the session? Because I wanted to make sure that I paid for it up front, and it was all, basically that we had the conversation and we were going to have the meeting, but there was no follow-up. So I was kind of left feeling a bit like, oh, I don't know, is this actually booked? Like, did she say 10 o'clock? Did she say 11 o'clock? Just, you don't want people to feel like that. You want to confirm to them, hi, it was so great talking to you today. I'm really looking forward to working with you. Just to confirm, your first appointment is booked in for this day and this time, and we will have weekly sessions ongoing after that. And then talk to them about, please, could you pay for your session up front? I will, your invoice is attached, or I will send you a Stripe link shortly. And then tell them about the paperwork, and have the paperwork linked if possible. So what you want to do is be able to send them a link so that they can complete the paperwork online and send it back to you really easy. The best thing about the admin is your friend is making it super easy for the client to understand everything. So that's why I say number 2, include links to the paperwork so you can get the client details. Obviously, it's really important for you when you're working with a client to get the information you need, their emergency contact, their GP, and their telephone number and email, all that kind of stuff. So getting all their important information and sending them your therapy contract so that you can, get that confirmation. They can understand what therapy is like working with you. Another way is to set up email templates so you don't have to think about what to write each time. So these are the email templates I'm sending you. I obviously have a list of them. You may have additional ones that you want to add. And if you're using Google Workspace, which if you have been around me for any length of time, I'm like banging on about Google Workspace and how amazing it is. You can create Gmail templates so you really thoughtfully think about what you want to write to clients. So if a client does cancel, what do you want to say to them? And it's really easier to write an email with no client in mind. So if you're replying to John's emailed you and said that he needs to cancel, and last week in therapy he was talking about how he lost his job and he's not, he's worried about money, but he's cancelled under your cancellation policy, you're going to feel really bad about saying to him, I assume, I'm like putting this on you, I assume you're going to feel really bad about saying to him, thanks, for letting me know that you've cancelled, but I am still going to have to charge you, when you know so much about his personal, situation. Whereas if you're writing the email from a really thoughtful place, like, as the thoughtful person that I'm sure you are, you'll write it in a way that when you need to reply to John, you can take his circumstance into account, but you can still enforce your boundaries if you want to. So that's why I say setting up email templates. And the quick thing to do is set up Gmail templates, so you can copy and paste them onto a Gmail template and like reply to an email within a couple of seconds, rather than having to think about your reply, type it all out. If you're not using Google, you could keep drafts in your, in your draft section in your inbox and just copy and paste them, and it's pretty similar. And then number 4 is sending alternative ways to see you. So if you work face-to-face with clients, I'm sure many of you worked during the pandemic and had to find different ways to work with clients, whether that was Zoom or FaceTime or something like that. So giving people an alternative way, because let's say they're sick, or there's a train strike or something, they can't get to you. The sick one is obviously if they're like really ill and it's not going to be worth them coming, then that's fine. But maybe they've just got a cold and they don't want to be in a small room with you, because they might infect you, but they still want to go ahead with therapy. If you give them an alternate way to see you, then that can reduce cancellations, because they know that they can always have that backup of seeing you on FaceTime or jumping on a Zoom with you. So that can be a really good way to also reduce cancellations. Okay, so I talked about this before with regards to the first session and getting payment for that up front. And I talked about that quite extensively, so we'll skip over that one. But what I would also say is, if you are in a schedule and you're seeing clients on a weekly or a regular weekly or bi-weekly session, you can also invoice them up front for those sessions. So either you send out an invoice each week and ask them to pay before their session, or what you could also do is pay monthly, ask them to pay monthly or in session blocks. So maybe you want them to pay for 6 sessions in advance or a whole month in advance. I do know clients that do this, and it works really, really well. And it can also reduce those cancellations and no-shows, because they feel like they've already paid for it, so they have to go. And obviously, I guess you don't want clients who are just there because they feel like they have to, but it can just be like that extra push. My husband had therapy the other day, and he was like, I just don't want it to do it today. And I was just like, have you paid for it? And he was like, no. And so I just think I won't turn up. I said, but you're still going to have to pay for the session. Because he hadn't actually paid for it, he was like, oh, I'm just going to skip it. And I was like, this is like really expensive. You need to go, like, you're going to be paying whatever for nothing. But because he hadn't actually physically given that money over, he was like, I just don't really want it. And I was like, no, you are going, because we don't have like 120 quid to waste, like for you just deciding it's not your thing today. So paying up front, if he had already paid that, I don't think he would have had that mentality. Also, it's much easier to enforce your cancellation and no-show policy if they've already paid you. So if they don't turn up, or if they cancel last minute, you can just say, thanks for letting me know. Just to let you know, that session is still chargeable, so I'll see you next week, kind of thing. You don't need to then say, it's chargeable and I'm gonna send you an invoice, or there's an invoice attached for your session, because that can cause some resentment's not, that's a too big a word, but saying to them, yeah, so you cancelled and here's your invoice anyway. Whereas, the alternative of that is, I'm just gonna, keep you the money that you've already paid me for that session. Even though it's the same thing, it can just sting a bit less, and also is much easier for you to just say, I'm going to keep your money, rather than I'm still going to charge you. It's just a mentality thing for you, rather than the client. Okay. And then lastly is sending confirmations and reminders. Now, I don't know if any of you do this, even if you have weekly or bi-weekly clients, depending on your client base. Maybe some of your clients are neurodiverse, ADHD possibly, or something like that. Maybe they're young, maybe they're couples and the couple's not communicating very well. Sending confirmations of appointments and reminders can significantly increase appointment show up rates. And if you've noticed now, when you go to the doctors, and I know this is ad hoc appointments, so obviously it's a bit different, but now the NHS and dentists and things like that are all sending confirmations of appointments and reminders the day before, because they have seen that actually it really improves the people that show up. And obviously for the NHS, there is no charge if you don't turn up. So that consequence is taken away anyway. But they have all implemented this, hairdressers, everybody, so that people actually turn up for their appointments, even if there is that cancellation period. And there's really easy ways you can do this using Google Calendar. So what you can do is book the appointment. I actually have a video of that, Kate. I didn't link that one about Google Calendar and easy session bookings, but actually that might be a good one to link if you can find it on YouTube. If not, I'll put it in the replay. So you can book the appointment on the system. So you book it on your Google Calendar. You can recur it for however long, for 6 months, for example. Send the invite to the client straight away, and also sync it with another free app called G Reminders, and that will send them a reminder every 24 hours before the session or 48 hours before. You can set that, but it sends automated reminders. So what you don't want to do is add more admin for you. You want to try and automate and systematize as much as possible. Okay, so that is the training on how to reduce no-shows and cancellations, all using admin procedures, obviously, because that is what my expertise is in. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you found that useful. Please remember to check out the description below, because I've put lots of information in there that I think you'll find really useful from these slides. Until next time, thanks for watching.